Imagine a world where just 3 days without electricity is enough to send an entire neighborhood into chaos. Fridges dying, water lines going dry, and the cold slipping into every room like a silent predator. The scary part isn't that we're weak, it's that we've forgotten how strong humans used to be. For hundreds of years, long before electricity, plumbing, or heating systems, our ancestors didn't just survive. They thrived using survival techniques that look primitive at first glance but are so sophisticated they still shock modern experts. They knew how to turn soil into stoves, charcoal and stone into heat, moss, leaves, and animal fat into life-saving materials. Every action, from lighting a fire to storing food, was the result of generations of trial and error in a world where a single mistake could mean death. What makes those techniques astonishing isn't their age, it's their durability. Most of them would still work flawlessly, even if every piece of modern technology collapsed. And if you've ever wondered whether today's people could survive without their familiar comforts, the answer lies in the very secrets our ancestors left behind. Think about it. In a world this fragile, built on devices and systems, could you make it if everything suddenly went dark? Share your thoughts below, and let's dive deeper into the techniques that time still can't erase. In the medieval world, where firewood was as rare as gold and a single flame could reveal your location to enemies or wild animals, people had to invent a way to cook that was efficient, safe, and subtle enough to leave no trace. That's how the earth oven was born, a technique that seems simple, but shows a level of understanding about heat and timing that makes many modern survivalists tip their hats. They dug a small pit, lined it with stones, burned a fire for hours until the rocks were hot enough to radiate heat on their own, then waited for the flames to fade into glowing embers. Meat, roots, tubers, or flatbread were wrapped in leaves, bark, or even coated with clay to keep moisture in, then buried completely under the soil. No smoke, no flame, no scent rising into the air, just a patch of ordinary earth in the darkness. That's why, during dangerous times, or when the village was under threat, a family could dig their meal up, sit together in absolute silence, listening only to the warm breath of steam rising from the cooked food, while keeping an ear on the wind to make sure no one had found them. The earth oven wasn't just a way to cook, it was a survival strategy, a kind of human wisdom shaped by nature and danger. And if you've ever cooked with an earth oven, you understand why this technique has lasted to this day. In the medieval world where winter wasn't just cold but hungry, people understood a truth modern folks often overlook. The ground wasn't just something to stand on. It was something to live from. The root cellar was born from that instinct, a completely natural, living refrigerator, where the temperature and humidity beneath the earth stayed so stable that a turnip could stay fresh for months, while the same turnip, left on a table, would wilt overnight. Medieval people dug chambers beneath their homes, lined them with straw, clay, and river stones, creating pockets of air that were cold but not freezing, damp but not moldy. Everything, cabbage, onions, cheese, butter, cured meat, even milk, was stored down there like deposits in a winter bank. But here's the real twist. To them, a root cellar wasn't a pantry. It was survival insurance. A house could burn, a field could fail, but the earth beneath your feet was the one thing that would never abandon you. Step through a creaking trap door, walk down those dark wooden steps, and you were touching the thin line between life and death that families had guarded for generations. And what surprises us even more is this. Every principle of the root cellar, stable temperature, slow airflow, absolute darkness, still works exactly the same today and stays effective even if the entire power grid collapses. That's why many survivalists say going underground is the first move when crisis hits. What do you think? If you had to choose between a modern refrigerator and a proper medieval root cellar, which one do you trust to last longer? Share your thoughts below. Your answer might reveal more than you expect. In the medieval era, clean water wasn't a given. It was a gamble every time you leaned over a cloudy stream. With no antibiotics, no hospitals, no doctors on standby, drinking the wrong mouthful could leave an entire family bedridden for a week, or take people who never woke up again. Because of that, they were forced to develop a water filtering system that was simple, yet so clever, that modern relief organizations still use it in disaster zones. First, they strained out debris with a thick layer of linen, then let the water move slowly through layers of gravel, coarse sand, fine sand, and finally charcoal. Each layer trapping an invisible killer, mud, decayed leaves, impurities, odors, even microorganisms. The water that came out wasn't sterile, but it was far safer. Safe enough that children didn't collapse with fevers. Safe enough that adults could survive the summer without losing the whole household to one stagnant puddle. In wealthier regions, they built stone basins and let water run through channels where gravity did the rest. In rural areas, they collected rainwater in clay-lined jars to prevent contamination. What made this technique remarkable wasn't its complexity, but the understanding of the danger dirty water carried. In a world where the smallest mistake cost lives, they knew water wasn't just something to drink. It was the line between life and death. If you lived back then, would you dare drink straight from the stream? Share your thoughts below. In the medieval world, when sunset meant the entire world fell into true darkness, light wasn't something you bought. It was something you made. And no material was more essential than tallow. Animal fat melted down, cleaned, and left to solidify into a life-saving fuel. What made tallow a treasure wasn't that it burned as brightly as beeswax. It didn't, but that any family, no matter how poor, could make it themselves. With just a little fat from a pig, sheep, or cow, they could create candles, oil lamps, lubricants, skin balms, and even emergency calories for days when there was nothing left to eat. With a small wick made from twisted cloth or reed fiber, tallow burned slowly, with enough light to work at night. So, watch over children, or guard the fire when the wind picked up. But tallow's real power came from its second purpose, warmth. A single cup of fat set beneath a stone shelf or inside a clay lamp could heat a corner of the room. And when spread on skin or boots, that same fat blocked wind, repelled moisture, and reduced heat loss. To medieval people, tallow wasn't just leftover grease from the butchering. It was what stood between a cold night and a night survived. If you lost power for a full 7 days, what do you think you would need first? A flashlight, a backup battery, or a cup of fat that could burn all night? Share your thoughts below. In the medieval world, long before letters, cavalry messengers, or anything resembling modern communication, one thing acted as an invisible lifeline connecting entire regions: the signal fires burning on distant hillsides. From far away, they looked like stray stars, but to the people of that time, each spark was a message, a warning, a lifeline. What made this system both mysterious and chilling was the absolute precision it demanded. If even one watchtower lit its fire 2 minutes late, if one guard misread the wind, an entire valley could wake to the screams of an invading army. Those fires weren't meant to light paths. They were medieval, long-distance phones, where a single mistake equaled the number of lives that would be lost by sunrise. The signal stations stood on mountaintops, wooden towers, and clearings along forest edges, places where winds were strong and human eyes could see for miles. When danger appeared, the guard shoved his torch into the pile of prepared wood. The flame surged into a pillar of light, and within a few heartbeats, the next tower burst into fire miles away. Then another, and another, as if the sky itself were waking the earth. And while today we get annoyed when we lose cell signal for a few minutes, they understood that losing the fire meant losing the village. The silence of the flame, the fragility of the moment, and the almost supernatural speed of wordless information made the signal fire network one of the most haunting legacies of the medieval world. What about you? If you lived back then, do you think you'd be the alert torch keeper, or the one whose mistake plunged an entire region into disaster? Share your thoughts below. In the medieval era, when there were no doctors, no antibiotics, and a small cut could turn into a death sentence, people were forced to rely on the only thing they could control: plants. But don't mistake their medicine chest for a cute basket of herbs. It was more like an armory where every leaf had two sides: heal or kill. Yarrow was used to stop bleeding, and a handful of the right leaves at the right moment could save someone injured in the fields. Garlic, crushed with alcohol, fought infection when no other option existed. Thyme and sage, simmered in a quiet pot, helped open the lungs during smoke-heavy winters. Comfrey was called bone knit because people believed it helped bones mend faster, and plantain was carried by nomads to pull venom from bites. It all sounds familiar until you hit the real twist. Pick the wrong plant, mistake a single leaf, and the odds of healing flipped instantly into poisoning. There were no manuals, no ingredient lists, only the spoken memories of the oldest survivors in the village. What made their system frightening yet strangely effective was the absolute observation it required. The color of the soil, the phase of the moon, the bitterness of a root, the scent rising from a crushed stem. Every detail was a life or death signal. If you walked into a medieval forest, would you dare pull a leaf to treat yourself? Or would you wait for the one person who knew which plant could save you or end you? Let me know what you'd choose in the comments below. In a medieval winter, staying warm wasn't a comfort. It was an hour-by-hour battle where a single mistake could cost a life. That's why their heating systems weren't architecture. They were survival strategy. At the center of every home was the hearth, the one flame standing between a family and the cold. But what modern people struggle to imagine is just how fragile that flame was. If the fire died at 3 in the morning, the person sleeping on the outer edge of the straw bed could be dead before the rooster crowed, because cold didn't kill like a blade. It killed by quietly drawing the heat out of the body. A draft from the wrong direction could turn the whole room into an ice trap. Smoke that thickened unexpectedly could suffocate a family in their sleep. A dirt floor too cold could numb someone's feet before the rest of their body slipped into hypothermia. They knew every crack of the wood, every gust of wind through the doorframe, every shift in the color of the smoke, because missing one signal meant risking that the entire household wouldn't wake up. And here's the part worth thinking about. Their system worked with no electricity, no heaters, nothing but skill and instinct. And us? Lose power for one night and most of us are shivering helplessly. Who do you think truly understood what it meant to fight the cold? Us or them? In the medieval winter months, when darkness stretched across nearly 2/3 of the day and the cold slipped through every wooden crack like a hungry spirit, people understood they couldn't fight the season with just firewood and stone. They needed something stronger, a reason to stay standing. That's when winter festivals appeared, not as celebrations, but as rituals that protected the spirit of the entire community. Modern people often think Yule or early winter feasts were just holidays. The truth is far colder. They were the days when the living lit fires to honor the dead who didn't survive the previous winter, a way of telling the darkness that the village still had guardians. Every torch held high wasn't decoration. It was a blunt declaration that they hadn't surrendered, a kind of political flex from poor villagers facing winter itself, an invisible ruler that demanded tribute. Crowds sang old songs, shared tiny portions of food, as if proving to each other that unity was a weapon too, because they knew that if the spirit collapsed, the body would follow instantly. The irony is that today we have electricity, heating systems, and endless light, yet we lack the one thing that kept them alive, the sense of standing together against danger. What do you think? If you had to endure a winter like theirs, would you choose to stand in the circle of fire or shrink back into the dark? Share your thoughts below. There's a truth most modern people never want to test. On medieval mountainsides, where there were no roofs, no walls, no fire big enough to challenge the night wind, a single wrong decision could erase you from the world without anyone ever knowing. When the sun went down, the entire landscape changed its voice. The wind began to howl like the breathing of something watching your every move, and the sky grew so dark that you couldn't tell rock from cliff edge. That was the environment shepherds lived in for months, and to survive, they relied on tactics that sound strange at first, but were brutally precise. They slept inside the flock to stay warm, not out of affection, but because sleeping even a few feet away was the dumbest way to die. Your body would lose heat so fast that by morning you'd be a frozen, stone-hard shape. They coated their skin and cloaks with fat, not out of tradition, but because without it, the moisture leaving their bodies would freeze right on their skin when the wind shifted. When exhaustion hit, they never dared fall into deep sleep. They broke the night into short segments, walking and waking in cycles, because on a mountainside where every step might be the lip of a cliff, 1 minute of carelessness was enough for the wind to push you into the ice. What's astonishing is that their techniques, body heat nesting, grease coating, micro-napping, are still used today in the military and polar expeditions. So, what do you think? If you were left alone on a mountainside for a night like they were, how long do you think you'd last? Share your thoughts below. And don't forget to follow for more survival secrets our ancestors paid for with their lives.